Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thanks for watching. Follow a brighter destiny for more powerful stories, and don't forget to subscribe.
Sweetheart, this is a platinum-level firm. We don't do charity consultations. Preston Sutherland Wright III said it from the bottom of the staircase, and he said it the way men like him said most things, like the words cost him nothing, and she should be grateful just to hear them. Vivian Ashworth Calloway set her portfolio flat across her knees and looked up at him without blinking. "I just want my meeting, Mr. Sutherland Wright," she said. "Let me be real with you," he answered, stepping closer, his voice dropping into something harder. "People like you keep thinking you belong in a building like this one. You don't, you never will." 4 hours, she said quietly. "I've been sitting here 4 hours. That was long enough to make my decision. Before we go further, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from tonight, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you will not want to miss." "What decision is that?" Preston asked. She smoothed the front of her blazer and met his eyes without flinching. What Preston Sutherland Wright III did not know, standing there at the bottom of his own marble staircase, was that the woman he had just spent 4 hours disrespecting was holding a $517 million contract with his firm's name printed at the top of it. The building had been designed to make people feel small, and Vivian understood that the moment she pushed through the revolving doors on North Michigan Avenue. The floors were pale gray stone, polished to a shine so complete it looked like standing water. The ceiling rose 5 stories above the lobby, ringed with gold trim that caught the morning light and threw it back down at anyone who dared to look up. A pair of orchids sat on the front desk that had probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and somewhere overhead, a string quartet recording played on a loop, soft and expensive and utterly indifferent. Every inch of the place whispered the same sentence: "You do not belong here." Vivian had heard that whisper for most of her adult life. She had stopped flinching at it a long time ago. She checked her watch as her heels clicked across the stone. 9:52 in the morning. 2 minutes past her scheduled appointment, and she had already forgiven herself for that, because she had spent 40 minutes stuck behind an accident on the Kennedy Expressway, a fact she filed away and refused to spend one more second thinking about. Vivian Ashworth Calloway did not waste energy on things she could not control. She had built a company from nothing on that single principle, and it had never once failed her. The front desk sat in the center of the lobby, like a throne on a raised platform. Behind it stood a young woman in a fitted charcoal blazer, blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, a brass nameplate that read Brooke Hendricks, Director of Client Relations. Her smile was the kind that only moved her mouth. "Good morning," Vivian said. "Vivian Ashworth Calloway. I have a 9:50 with Mr. Sutherland Wright." Brooke's manicured finger ran down the appointment book until it landed on the name. Something in her expression shifted, small and quick, like a door closing softly behind someone's eyes. "Of course," Brooke said. "He's just wrapping something up. Please, have a seat." Vivian held her gaze 1 second longer than was polite. Not long enough to be rude. Just long enough that Brooke understood she had been seen. She crossed to the waiting area, 4 creamed leather chairs arranged around a low glass table, and she chose the one facing the room. She set her portfolio across her lap, folded her hands over it and waited. 10:15 came and went. The lobby moved around her like a slow, indifferent tide. A man in a navy suit crossed the floor with his phone pressed to his ear, talking about a merger he clearly wanted everyone to overhear. 2 young associates stepped off the elevator, laughing about something that had happened at brunch. A courier dropped off a package at the desk and left without a second glance in her direction. Vivian did not check her phone. She did not cross and uncross her legs. She had learned a long time ago that the way a person waits tells everyone in the room exactly who they are, and she had no intention of handing this lobby a single thing it could use against her. At 10:30, Brooke reappeared from a side hallway, carrying a stack of folders under one arm. She glanced over without slowing down. "He won't be much longer," she said. It was not an apology. It was a dismissal wearing an apology's clothes. Vivian watched her walk away and rested one hand flat against the top of her portfolio. Inside that leather folder sat documents that Brooke Hendricks had no idea existed, documents the man on the 4th floor had no idea were sitting 40 feet from his own front desk. That thought settled into her chest like a warm coal. Take your time, she thought. Take every minute you need. At 11:04, a man walked through the revolving doors with no briefcase, no folder, nothing in his hands at all, and moved to the lobby the way people move through rooms they already believe they own. Brooke came around the desk before he'd taken 3 steps, arms slightly open, her smile suddenly real for the first time all morning. "Mr. Holloway," she said warmly, "so good to see you. Go right on up, he's expecting you." She walked him to the elevator herself, pressed the button, and something he said made her laugh out loud. When the doors closed, she turned back toward the lobby still smiling, and her eyes passed over Vivian the way you pass over a potted plant on your way somewhere else. Vivian did not move. She did not tighten her jaw or let anything cross her face. But she marked the moment, clean and precise, the way something you plan to use later. No appointment, she thought. Walk straight to the elevator, 3 minutes door to door. She looked down at her watch. She had been sitting in that chair for 1 hour and 12 minutes. Noon came, then 12:30. The lobby kept performing its slow, expensive theater, phones ringing softly behind the desk, elevators opening and closing on people who all seemed to know exactly where they were going. At 12:40, a woman appeared from a side corridor sorting a stack of mail, older than Brooke, silver threading through close-cropped natural hair, a badge that read Odessa Marsh. She glanced up, and her eyes found Vivian still sitting in the same chair, and something moved across her face that had nothing to do with personal recognition. They had never met. It was something deeper than that, the kind of understanding that does not need an introduction. Odessa walked over and leaned in close. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I am so sorry, I don't know what's happening up there." "Can I get you some water?" Vivian looked up into a pair of steady, serious eyes, the first honest face she had encountered in 3 hours inside that building. "Water would be lovely," she said. "Thank you." Odessa came back and set the glass down with both hands, careful and deliberate, like it was the smallest thing she could offer, and she wanted to offer it properly. Their eyes met once more. Neither of them said anything else. They did not need to. 1 o'clock passed, then 1:30. Vivian's portfolio had not moved from her lap, but inside her chest she was counting, every minute becoming a number, every number becoming a fact, and Vivian had learned a long time ago that facts were the most dangerous thing you could carry into any room. At 1:45, Brooke reappeared beside her chair with the same bright, hollow smile. "He's finishing a very important call," she said. "Just a little longer." "Thank you," Vivian said, and watched her walk away without another word. She looked down at her watch one more time. 3 hours and 53 minutes. At 2:01, laughter drifted down from somewhere above her, and she looked up to see Preston Sutherland Wright III coming down the marble staircase, flanked by 2 other men, all 3 of them mid-conversation, all 3 of them grinning. He was tall, broad through the shoulders, wearing a charcoal suit with a folded pocket square, the posture of a man who had never once in his life waited for anything. He reached the bottom of the stairs. His eyes swept the lobby and landed on her, and one thin sliver of a moment, something flickered across his face, an unguarded confusion, the look of a man who had walked into a room and found something he did not remember leaving there. He recovered fast. He crossed the floor with his hand already extended and his smile already assembled. "Miss Calloway, is it?" "Sorry about the wait. Come on up." Vivian stood slowly. She smoothed the front of her blazer. "Actually, Mr. Sutherland Wright," she said, her voice calm, "and even I have been waiting since 9:50 this morning." "It is now 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That is 4 hours." Preston blinked. Then he laughed, a short breezy sound, the sound of a man dismissing a minor inconvenience. The market doesn't keep a schedule, he said. You understand how it is. I understand completely, she said, and followed him upstairs. The conference room on the 4th floor was all glass and brushed steel, a table built to seat 14 with only 3 chairs pulled out today, and windows that stretched floor to ceiling over the Chicago River. Preston sat at the head of the table without offering her a choice of seat, simply gesturing across from him the way you gesture toward a chair for someone you have already decided matters less than you. Brooke slipped in behind them and settled into a corner chair with a notepad balanced on her knee. She did not look at Vivian once. Vivian set her portfolio flat on the table, folded her hands on top of it, and waited. Preston clicked a remote and a slide appeared on the screen behind him, polished and expensive and completely wrong for the conversation he was about to have. So, he said, leaning back with the loose confidence of a man who had never once been told no, let's talk about what we can do for you. The pitch took 19 minutes. He walked her through the firm's entry-level institutional tier, a package designed, he explained, for portfolios in the 40 to 60 million range. He used words like foundational and onboarding journey. He showed her pie charts and conservative growth projections, built around a client who was dipping a cautious toe into deep water for the very first time. Halfway through the 3rd slide, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, held up one finger without looking at her, and answered. Yeah. No, tell them to hold until Thursday. Not the full amount, half, I'll explain later. He hung up without acknowledging she was still sitting across from him, and clicked to the next slide. We find clients at this stage respond well to a slower, more guided approach, he said, especially clients newer to institutional investing. What makes you assume I'm new to institutional investing? Vivian asked. He smiled, patient and indulgent. I didn't mean anything by it. Just standard process. His phone buzzed again. He answered it again, standing halfway from his chair to turn his shoulder away from her. Thursday, I said, no exceptions. He sat back down and cleared his throat. Where were we? Your standard process, Vivian said. Right, he said, clicking forward. We typically suggest clients at this level bring in a financial advisor they trust, someone they've worked with before, just to get a second opinion before committing to anything. No rush. We want you to feel comfortable. A financial advisor she trusted, as though she had walked in off the street with no plan and needed someone to hold her hand through the paperwork. She was the financial advisor. She had been one for 13 years. She said nothing. He reached his final slide and clasped his hands on the table, giving her the look she imagined he gave everyone at this point in the meeting, warm and paternal and entirely rehearsed. Now we do prefer new clients start at this tier first, he said. It lets us build trust before we move into anything more substantial. The word landed in the room like a closed door. Substantial. Vivian looked down and opened the cover of her portfolio slowly. I see, she said quietly. And what tier would a $517 million portfolio fall into? Preston laughed, easy and automatic, the laugh of a man who found the question mildly amusing rather than serious. That, he said, leaning back, puts you in a completely different category. That's our flagship partnership tier. We're talking our top 11 clients, institutions, legacy funds, people who have been with this firm for decades. He smiled at her. Is that the number you're working toward? It would be 12, Vivian said. She reached into her portfolio and placed a single document on the table. She slid it across with 2 fingers, unhurried, and folded her hands in front of her. The document was a preliminary term sheet on Sutherland Cole Wealth Partners letterhead, a $517 million institutional transfer from Callaway Capital Group, dated 3 weeks earlier and initialed by the firm's own compliance department. The smile left Preston's face the way water leaves a drain, slow at first, then all at once. His eyes moved across the page again and again, his brain refusing to accept what it was already showing him. In the corner, Brooke's pen had gone still above her notepad. She was staring at the table with the expression of someone who has just realized the floor beneath her is made of glass. Preston set the document down. Vivian, he said, spreading his hands open on the table. May I call you Vivian? Obviously, I knew exactly who you were the moment you walked in. This is our standard process. Every client goes through the same onboarding presentation. That's just how we... Mr. Sutherland, right, Vivian said. Her voice was quiet. It did not need to be anything else. He stopped talking. I arrived at this building at 9:50 this morning, she said. You did not see me until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 11:04, a man walked in off the street with no appointment and was personally escorted upstairs inside 3 minutes. During this meeting, you answered your phone twice without excusing yourself. You presented me a package built for a fraction of my portfolio, and you suggested I bring in a financial advisor I trust before making any decisions. The room had gone completely silent. I founded my first company at 23, she continued. I have built and sold 3 businesses. I have managed institutional capital for 13 years. Callaway Capital Group currently holds controlling interest in 9 mid-cap corporations across 4 industries. She let that settle. I am the financial advisor, Mr. Sutherland Wright. I have been for over a decade. His jaw tightened. Look, he said, his voice dropping harder now. I hope you're not going to let a scheduling mix-up cost you a significant opportunity. This is business. Let's not make it personal. Vivian looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then she closed her portfolio, stood, and walked to the door. Thank you for your time, she said, and let herself out without looking back. Preston Sutherland Wright III sat alone at the head of his empty table, staring at a term sheet with his own firm's name printed at the top of it. Vivian pushed through the revolving doors into the October wind off the lake, and the city hit her all at once. The noise, the cold, the smell of a hot dog cart on the corner. After 4 hours inside that marble silence, Chicago felt loud and alive and entirely real. Her driver, a quiet man named Roland, who had worked with her for 6 years, took one look at her face and said nothing as he opened the door. Callaway Capital, she said, sliding into the back seat. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to stare out the window at nothing. Then she called her chief of staff, Dominic Hale. How did it go, he asked. Get Naomi. I need you both in my office in 40 minutes. That bad? Make the call, Dominic. Naomi Ferris, her general counsel, picked up on the second ring with the unhurried calm of a woman who had been expecting this call for hours. I need a formal withdrawal notice drafted and ready by the time I get back, Vivian said. Send it certified courier, not email. I want him to hold it in his hands. It'll be ready, Naomi said. The courier arrived at Sutherland Cole's building at 4:11 that afternoon. Preston tore the envelope open, standing at his desk, and read the 2 lines twice. Callaway Capital Group is formally withdrawing from all negotiations, effective immediately. $517 million, gone, before a single transfer had ever been made. He called her personal line. It rang twice. I expected your call, Vivian said, her voice calm as a closed window. This morning got completely away from me, he said. Let me take you to dinner. Let me bring Walter Cole in personally. We can renegotiate the whole structure. I didn't withdraw because I was offended, she said. I withdrew because you showed me exactly how your firm operates when it believes no one important is watching. That's the only data point I needed. The line went dead. Preston stood at his desk for a long moment, and when his expression finally changed, the embarrassment drained out of it, and something quieter and more dangerous took its place. By 7 the next morning, he was already at his desk, working his contact list before his assistant had even arrived. Just something I wanted to flag, he told the first name on the list, a fund manager in Milwaukee who had known him for years. Heard some things coming out of Callaway Capital lately. Instability in the portfolio structure. Nothing confirmed. Thought you should know. He paused to let the seed settle. She's talented, I'll give her that. Young though, 37. And I think it shows sometimes, honestly, made a very emotional decision this week. Blew up a real partnership over a bruised ego. He made 11 calls before noon, and by Thursday, 2 of Vivian's longest-standing institutional partners had rescheduled their quarterly reviews without giving a reason. Dominic traced the pattern back to its source by the end of the week. It's him, he told Vivian. He's running a whisper campaign. Old money, closed loop. Men who've known each other 30 years and trust each other's instincts the way people trust family. He knows exactly which words to use, Vivian said quietly. Young, emotional, reactive. Words that carry a particular weight when they're attached to a black woman in finance. He doesn't have to explain anything, he just has to say them and let the room do the rest. On Friday morning, Naomi appeared in Vivian's office doorway with a folder under one arm and an expression Vivian had learned to read. Close the door, Vivian said. Preston's attorneys filed a pre-contract dispute notice yesterday afternoon, Naomi said. The claim is thin, barely viable. Any judge would toss it inside 60 days. But the filing itself triggers a mandatory 45-day review, and during that window, the joint escrow account tied to the transfer is frozen. $206 million locked for up to 45 days. Vivian stood and walked to the window, looking down at LaSalle Street. The Harrow acquisition, she said. It wasn't a question. Closes in 38 days, Naomi confirmed before the freeze would lift. Vivian turned from the window. Who does Preston actually answer to? Naomi blinked. Sorry, he inherited that firm, Vivian said. He didn't build it, someone else did. Who does he actually answer to? Walter Cole, Naomi said slowly. Co-founder, mostly retired, still holds 30% of the firm. He hasn't been active in years. Preston treats him like a figurehead. Find out if he's really a figurehead, Vivian said. I want the founding partnership agreement, going back to the very beginning. This weekend. By Monday, Naomi had 3 neat stacks of paper on the conference table. The 1985 founding agreement, still legally active, never amended. A clause halfway down the second page gave Walter Cole full veto power over any legal action taken in the firm's name above a defined threshold. Preston's filing cleared that threshold by a wide margin. He filed without telling Walter, Dominic said quietly. He filed without telling Walter, Naomi confirmed, which means Preston didn't just retaliate against a former client. He violated his own founding agreement doing it. Naomi placed a second, thinner document on the table, a summary page stamped sealed arbitration record in faded red ink. 9 years ago, a senior employee filed an internal complaint, Naomi said. Her name is Renee Ashcroft, 59 now, pushed out shortly after she raised it. The complaint documented a pattern in how the firm treated non-white clients, wait times, which advisor got assigned, the language used in initial consultations. She was offered a settlement and signed an NDA. The case is sealed, but the fact that it exists and that the firm paid to make it disappear is a matter of legal record. The table went quiet. What Preston had done to Vivian on Tuesday morning was not a bad day. It was a pattern documented, paid for once already, and repeated on the wrong woman on a Tuesday morning in October. He's done this before, Dominic said. The firm has done this before, Vivian said. Preston just kept the tradition alive. Get me Walter Cole's address, she said. Walter Cole lived in a stone house north of the city, on a quiet street lined with oaks, older than most of the people living beneath them. He answered his own door in a cardigan, white-haired, soft with age, and he recognized her name before she finished introducing herself. He led her to a study-lined floor to ceiling with books, and Vivian laid the 2 documents on the table between them without theater and explained exactly what had happened. He read the filing, he read the veto clause. For a long moment he said nothing at all. I thought you should know, Vivian said simply, and let herself out. She heard nothing for 4 days. On Tuesday morning, at 11:42, Naomi appeared in her doorway, holding a single sheet of paper, smiling the way she almost never smiled in the office, a real smile that reached her eyes and stayed there. He did it, Naomi said. Walter Cole had called his personal attorney at 9 that morning. By 11:15, he had formally exercised his veto rights under the 1985 agreement. Preston's filing was dead. The review period was canceled. The escrow freeze was lifted, $206 million unlocked. Vivian called the Harrow acquisition team first. The timeline was intact. Preston found out an hour later when his own attorney called with a 2-minute conversation that had nothing left to strategize. He called Walter immediately. You had no right to go around me, he said. It was a legal action taken without my knowledge, in direct violation of our agreement. Walter said, his voice even and unhurried. Clean it up, Preston. Tom, this woman walked away from 500 million. Clean it up, Walter said and hung up. By Wednesday, the story had moved through the building, the way stories always move through closed spaces, quiet and fast and in every direction at once. Preston had been countermanded by a man in a cardigan who hadn't set foot in the office in years, and the whispers he had planted about Vivian's instability were growing a second crop of questions, this time about him. That Wednesday evening, Vivian let Dominic bring a bottle of wine to her office, and the three of them sat together while the city went dark outside the windows and simply breathed for a moment. She was not convinced it was over. She was right. Her phone rang at 6:15 Thursday morning. She was already awake, already at her desk with coffee, and the Harrow file spread open in front of her. Dominic, she answered. Pull up the Tribune, he said. His voice was tight. Financial desk, top of the page. The headline loaded before he finished the sentence. Callaway Capital's bold strategy, or a young founder's gamble. It was not a hit piece. That was the sophisticated and deliberate thing about it. No direct accusations, no named sources making a false statement that could be challenged in court. It was built entirely out of implication, each one technically deniable, each one precisely aimed. It mentioned her age 3 times, in 3 separate sentences, each one placed beside a word like risk or uncertainty, as though her age were the story, as though 13 years of building something real could be quietly reframed as inexperience by a reporter who had never built anything at all. Preston had not thrown a punch. He had opened a door and let the draft do his work for him. By 10 that morning, her assistant had logged 11 calls. Vivian answered none of them. She sat with the particular exhaustion of being a black woman in a world that only ever needed the smallest whisper of doubt to start asking whether she truly belonged in the room she had built with her own hands. She had been answering that question since she was 22 years old, since she stepped off a bus from Dayton, Ohio, with 2 suitcases and a plan nobody believed in but her. She rejected the idea of responding completely. A public defense meant playing his game, on his board by his rules, and Vivian Ashworth Callaway had not built a 9-figure company by playing other people's games. I need Renee Ashcroft's phone number, she said quietly, to no one but herself, and I need to find Odessa Marsh. Renee Ashcroft answered on the 4th ring from a small office in Milwaukee, where she had spent 9 years building a quiet consulting practice for nonprofits. Her voice was careful in the way people become careful after they've learned what happens when they aren't. Vivian told her everything, unhurried, unvarnished, the lobby, the whisper campaign, the filing, the article with her age, printed like a warning label. She told her she had accessed the arbitration record's existence, not its sealed contents, and that a serious investigative journalist named Adriana Vance was building a documented story about discrimination patterns in wealth management, industry-wide, not firm-specific. I am not asking you to violate your NDA, Vivian said. I would never ask that. I'm asking whether you'd be willing to speak generally on the record about your professional experience. Nothing that touches your settlement. A long silence stretched over the line. Then one question, quiet. Does he still work there? Yes, Vivian said. He does. When do you need me? Renee said. Odessa Marsh answered her call 2 days later, cautious from the first syllable. I remember you, she said, before Vivian had finished introducing herself. You were the woman in the lobby that Tuesday morning. Vivian told her the shape of things, careful not to overwhelm her, and made clear from the start that she owed nothing, that hanging up right now would be understood completely. I've kept a journal, Odessa said finally, her voice slower now, more deliberate. 6 years. I started it because nobody ever believes you without proof. I wrote down dates, names when I had them, who waited and who didn't, who got the elevator and who got the chair. I need the weekend, Odessa said. Take it, Vivian said. Call me Sunday. Odessa called Sunday morning, 5 minutes early. I'll talk to her, she said. No hesitation left in her voice at all. I've been sure since Thursday. I just needed the weekend to stop being scared. By Sunday afternoon, Odessa Marsh and Adriana Vance had spent 40 minutes on the phone, and the reporter's single text to Vivian afterward read only 2 words. This is real. Vivian and Naomi drove to Walter Cole's house together the following week, and this time they brought everything, laid out clean and documented across the coffee table in his study. The unauthorized filing, the 9-year-old arbitration record, 6 years of Odessa's dated entries, the phone records connecting Preston's office to the reporter who had written the planted article. Walter read for a long time in silence, his face going still in the particular way of a man measuring the distance between what he believed about something and what it actually was. Was there a compliance memo? He asked finally. Did he ever acknowledge any of this in writing? Naomi placed one last document on the table, an internal memo from 5 years earlier addressed to Preston Sutherland, Wright 3, detailing a formal review of client service equity concerns. At the bottom, in his own handwriting, was his signature and the date. He had read it. He had signed it. He had done nothing. Walter looked up, not with guilt, not with apology, but with the flat, unblinking clarity of a man who had already made a decision he would not walk back. I'll speak to Adriana Vance, he said. The story went live at 6 the following Sunday morning. Vivian read it once, straight through, in the dark of her kitchen, then again. Every word she had spoken was there, exact and unaltered. Renee's account was measured and quietly devastating. Odessa's journal ran across 4 paragraphs like a ledger nobody could argue with. And at the bottom of the 3rd page, 1 line from Walter Cole. The pattern documented in this report is deeply inconsistent with the values this firm was founded on. The board is initiating an immediate review of all relevant practices and personnel decisions. By Sunday afternoon, 2 of Sutherland Cole's largest institutional clients had requested urgent meetings for Monday morning. Neither was a courtesy call. Preston walked into his own building at 8:45 Monday morning, with talking points from a crisis consultant and a plan that lasted exactly as long as it took him to reach the 4th floor. Walter Cole sat at the head of the table with 3 board members and 2 outside attorneys, and no one stood when Preston walked in. Walter read the veto clause aloud, every word. Then he read the signed compliance memo aloud, every word of that too. Preston tried to speak twice, and both times Walter raised one hand and he stopped. You filed legal action against a client using this firm's name without my authorization, Walter said, his voice steady and entirely without heat. You were told about this pattern 5 years ago. You signed the memo. Nothing changed. And then you planted a story to retaliate against the same client you had already harmed. We're done talking. Preston Sutherland Wright III was suspended from all executive duties before 10 that morning, pending a full board review. He surrendered his access card at 9:47. By 3 that afternoon, $312 million had walked out the door with 2 departing clients, and the firm's assets under management had dropped nearly 19% before the markets closed. He walked out of his grandfather's building, carrying nothing but his phone, and the silence of everyone who used to answer his calls and no longer did. 3 days later, a woman named Eleanor Whitfield called Vivian's office directly. She was Chief Investment Officer of the American Municipal Workers Pension Trust, one of the largest and most respected institutional funds in the country, and she had followed Vivian's career for years. I read the article, Eleanor said, when they finally sat across from one another the following week. It did not give me doubts about you. It gave me clarity about you. The number Eleanor placed on the table that day was $1.4 billion, more than double what Vivian had walked away from 6 weeks earlier. Long overdue, Eleanor said when they shook hands at the door. Yes, Vivian agreed. It is. 3 weeks after that, Vivian signed the partnership at her own conference table, in the building she had leased 8 years earlier with a pen she still kept in her desk drawer. She did not make a speech. She simply closed her eyes for one quiet moment, and in that moment she saw all of it. The studio apartment at 22, the pitch rooms full of men who had looked through her like glass, the marble floor on a Tuesday morning in October, a glass of water set down with both hands. She wrote Odessa Marsh a letter that same week, on her own stationery, in her own handwriting, The way you write to someone who deserves to know a real person is on the other end. Funny. She enclosed a formal offer, Director of Client Experience at Callaway Capital Group, a position built specifically around what Odessa understood about making people feel seen. Funny. The salary was triple what she had earned in 9 years at Sutherland Coal. Odessa read the letter at her kitchen table before sunrise, on a Saturday morning, her coffee going cold beside her. Funny. She called the old firm at 8:02 Monday and resigned. On her first day, she walked through the doors of Callaway Capital and stopped just inside the entrance. Funny. There was no cold marble stretching to the horizon, no art announcing its own price. It was warm and quiet, and full of people who were there because they had earned it. Funny. Vivian was standing in the center of the lobby, not behind a desk, not at a distance, waiting on her feet. Funny. "Welcome," Vivian said and took her hand. "There's no waiting here." If this story reminded you that patience and dignity are never the same thing as weakness, drop a like and subscribe, because I have another story just like this one waiting for you tomorrow. Funny. Have a wonderful day. This story and its characters are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons, companies, or events is coincidental. Funny. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Funny. Any resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. Funny. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.